So I just recently watched a 46-minute video on YouTube by Matt. Yeah, that's his name, Matt. It's Matt, 4 T's. That's what it is, Matt. And he did a very extensive, I guess you could say, behind the scenes look at what happened with the Archie book. Kind of trying to, I guess you could say, look at it from a, I guess you could say, balanced, sort of reasonable manner and legal manner, if you will. Now, basically, he talked about, of course, what happened. Why the comics were so controversial, how things came to be, and why, basically, as some people are wondering about the IDW run, and he talked about this towards the end, why it is so, I guess you could say, limited. And he did, like I said, he did a very good extensive job. He talked about how Ken Penders came into being and how Penders basically over time convinced Archie to basically let him take the book in a more serious manner, more serious direction, talking to the right people and everything. And then how he came in conflict with some people that got put into positions that were basically, positions to where he would answer to, like Mike Politro, Mike Pilotino, whatever his name is, who's now the head of Archie Comics, if you will, being basically the guy that Ken would have to answer to and all that, and how he wanted Ken to take the comic in a more directive, directive area and not just go willy-nilly with it, all the time, basically, do it, basically go his own path and everything with the comic. Mike basically wanted him to be more focused, if you will, essentially. He wanted him to be more focused. So Matt went over that. He went over that history, how Penders came to be, why Penders could be why he is right now, talking about his younger years when he was a kid, when he grew up around, and stuff like that. He talked about Ken having to share, after the Knuckles book was canceled, having to share writing duties with Carl Ballers, and everything. And how that basically was a recipe for disaster because the styles essentially clashed, because Penders was put on backstory duty when he was back on the Sonic comic after the Knuckles comic was canceled, and Ballers was, the head writer. So the stories basically clashed. A lot of the stories clashed and everything, to the point that one of the stories, of course, that Penders wrote was the Mobius Years Later. So that was the backstory he was using in the main comics that Bowles was the head writer of. And what Bowles was writing in the main portion of the comic, the same comic that would, have Mobius Years Later, conflicted with what Penders was doing at that time. And Matt basically, he basically kind of confirmed what we all felt was the reason for that conflict between Carl and Ken. That reasoning being is the fact that, Ken wanted Mobius Years Later to be the definitive future. He wanted it to be the future of the characters. And Ballers, according to what Matt said in this video essay, felt that I conflicted with what he was doing because, it made what he was doing be, kind of seem, unimportant. Like, there was no reasoning for what he was writing to even, be in existence. So there was a conflict of interest that eventually led to Carl basically stepping away and Ken stepping back in to basically resume the duties of head writer. And that, according to Matt, Ken basically took a lot of what Carl had done and basically restructured it to kind of maybe stick it to Carl for trying to, I guess you could say, stick it to him or not seeing eye to eye with what he was doing. But anyway, again, it's a very interesting video. He does touch upon Ian Flynn coming in, and of course, of course, being first known as Ian Poto, the person behind Other M, and he even brought that up. And basically, it's acknowledged here that Ken was asked to try to help Ian kind of get his foot in the door, kind of like Ian got the opportunity. According to this video, Ian was persistent in wanting to work with Archie, work on the comics, but Archie kept saying, nope, not going to happen, not going to happen, not going to happen. So just as he's about to give up, that's when he gets the phone call of, hey, you want to come in and work? And this is when Mike Palantino was basically in charge. So he had called Ian in. Ian was going to do some backup stories, here and there, kind of do some editing, kind of just, do some on-the-job training. And Ken was approached by Mike to train Ian, to kind of help Ian be like a ghostwriter or whatever, and so on. And Ken apparently had no issue with that. He had no qualms about that whatsoever, to help Ken Penders, not Ken Penders, but help Ian Flynn, kind of get his feet wet, in the Archie Sonic books, trying to find the right word to say. So Ken had no problem. But then over time, things started to really get conflicting with Ken and Mike, and how, how each wanted the comic to go. And eventually, Ken, according to Matt, in this video, gets a phone call and finds out that, yeah, he's getting replaced by Ian Flynn. Ian Flynn's going to be the new head writer. And yeah, he wasn't too thrilled about that. Now, one thing that Matt did here is he had several interviews that he did. I'm assuming on his Twitch channel. I don't know if he has a Twitch channel, but he did some interviews individually with Carl Ballers, Ken Penders, Ian Flynn, and others that were involved in this to kind of get the gist of what happened behind the scenes. And then, of course, he does go into the lawsuit situation and how that all changed around the end of what was the Mecha Sally arc. Because for anybody that read the Mecha Sally arc, that read the endangered species portion of it, kind of knows how much of a editorial nightmare that ended up being, because what was promoted, cover-wise, got changed, and that there are some pages that were released online that were originally supposed to be in the comic. So anyway, he goes through all that history, how Ian Flynn came to be the head writer, and basically how Ian Flynn, being who he is, being a student of literature, taking what he knew and learned from college and everything, and applying it to trying to get the comic back on track, and stuff like that. I mean, he does mention that when Ian did first come on board, that Mike Pelletino's first order of business for Ian to do was to clean up the mess that was Ken Penders' work. Basically, clean it up, streamline it more, and all that. In fact, Mike Pelletino wanted him to reboot the comic when he first came on board, and Ian, justifiably argued at the time, no, I don't want to do that. Let's try to work something else out to, where we can keep the existing continuity at that time. And they came up with a compromise to where, okay, fine, you could keep the continuity, but streamline this, make it more cleaner, make it more uncluttable with characters. And that's what Ian did, as we all know. He did it with Sir Connery, he did it with Tommy Turtle, and a few other characters that were written and created by Ken Penders, maybe some other people. But the one that really got, Ken ticked off was, of course, the death of Locke, because Locke was essentially based off his own dad. And that's why he created that father-son dynamic between Locke and Knuckles. Basically, because basically he was basing it off his own experience with his dad. To a degree. So he wasn't too thrilled with that, and that kind of really didn't help out much with that relationship between Ian and Ken. In fact, even though it was slowly deteriorating, doing that really deteriorated it even more. And yeah, it wasn't, if that wasn't enough, of course, it was around the same time that, Ken finds out about, Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. And as we all know, what came about from that was not a pleasant day for both EA or Sega or even Archie to an extent. Now, Matt did mention, that Ken only had like maybe, financially $500 in his bank account. Now, I don't know if that's true or anything. I don't know if that's true or anything, but apparently the timing couldn't have been better for Ken to go and take legal action against EA, BioWare, and Archie Comics. Now, the BioWare one was kind of put on hold, dismissed or whatever, because of the Archie one going on. And yeah, it's just, wasn't, as we all know from talking about it ourselves, it was just a humongous, huge, gigantic mess. And even Matt, when he talked about this, the way he kind of brought up the legal portion of the whole situation is he doesn't know what to believe. He doesn't know who's telling the truth. He doesn't know if Archie's telling the truth or if Ken Penders is telling the truth. Because he did show that Ken Penders had, 2 work-for-hire documents sent to him, but that, basically Ken, but also mentioned Ken wanted the actual documents, and that Ken could not accept this, and that in his favor, he could say, hey, you forged my name. And Matt, in this video, basically feels like, he doesn't know whether or not Penders could be right about that, or if Penders is lying about that. So, again, it's one of those situations of hearsay and hearsay, of who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth, But anyway, the video overall, the essay video that Matt did is pretty good. It's actually pretty good, very detailed in what he talks about. And then he gets to Sonic being an IDW and how Sega is part of this now, and not just Sega of America, but mostly Sega of Japan. And how this was all pitched basically was what happened, according to the interview he did with Ian Flynn, is that Ian and his team thought, hey, the comic's going to continue, everything's fine, we're going to build to 300, go from there, right? Well, on the same day they thought that, they get, Ian gets a call from his buddy, once again, and his buddy, who along with him thought the comics was going to continue, tells him, yeah, Archie's pulled the plug. They've lost the license to the Sonic to distribute the Sonic comics. It's dead. And Ian's like, what? So Ian's like, yeah, what a rotten Christmas present to have, right? But then, of course, like I said, Matt brings up the fact that, not that long after, IDW makes a deal with, Sega, I should say, makes a deal with IDW to publish new comics. And much to Ian and his friends and his crew's surprise, they get brought on board to write the stories and to, basically draw and color the art. I'm trying to find the right word to say. And it was during Ian's pitch for what kind of story he wanted to do for IDW that he went to a meeting in Burbank, and in that meeting was one of the head people behind Sonic. I think it was one of the co-creators of Sonic. And he basically he was surprised, a little nervous, but he still went on with, his pitch for what he wanted to do. Now, apparently, according to Matt's research, the deal with IDW and Sega, Sega being involved with this, is that there are a few caveats, and this is why. This is why, because a lot of people, even game apologists, did a video on this, and Fantastic did a video on this. Everybody was wondering, like, why is the IDW comics not picking up steam? Like, where is that investment that we used to have with the Archie books? Where is it? And apparently, according to what Matt showed on the screen towards the end of the video, the caveats for IDW having the license and Sega's involvement is there are to be no characters used from Archie comics, no characters used from either of the Sonic cartoons or any other Sonic media. You heard me. Basically, they cannot use anything connected to Archie, Satayam, or any other media. Now, they could reference it or even redesign it and say, yeah, this is Sally, give them the same name and say, yeah, this is Sally. This is, the Sally everybody knows, but, of a different, nature, different personality. They could do that. They could work around it. It's just that they can't use the Sally from the Sonic comics of Archie and Satayam. And I do apologize for my finger hitting the mic earlier. But yeah, basically, long story short, the reason they can't really, punch it, if you will, into another gear is because Sega of Japan, according to what Matt researched, is kind of holding them down a little bit, because I think the reason, and I think he alluded to this himself, is they don't want to have to go through what they did previously with Penders or any of them when it comes to writing stories that are separate from the games, have no connection to the games or what they're promoting at that time. So yeah, that's what's going on. No involvement of characters from the Archie comics, the Satayam cartoon, or any other media. It's got to strictly be game-related and game-based. Again, though, they can work around that by bringing the characters in, but basically in a totally different manner. So in other words, they could bring in the Freedom Fighters, but do it in a way to where they're not the same Freedom Fighters as they were in Archie comics. They could have the same names, maybe similar backgrounds, but be totally different characters. There is a way around that. That's why I think you see little references, like in the recent issue, which is sort of a Sonic Riders adaptation story. You kind of see, and people point this out, you kind of see a character in the background that looks like a reference to Sally. So there you go. You could end up getting a Sally in there that, is the Sally we know she is, that we know she is, but totally different background, maybe a little bit of a different design, but have a look that's like, yeah, we know who that is. So right now, that's what's kind of handicapping them, from really going full throttle. And to me, that's not good. That's not good. If you're going to handicap somebody from doing a comic, at its full potential, all because you don't want to risk what happened with the previous comic distributor, then why even let the comic exist in the first place? That's my question. Why even let the comic exist if you're gonna hold back and handicap them because they're not gonna do the comic the way you want? I mean, there is a way to work around this. Again, they can bring the characters in, but bring them in a way that it's them, but it's done in a way that separates them from the Archie versions and the Satayam versions. There is a way to do that. It's been done before. Take a look at TMNT if you want to have any example on all the different incarnations of characters like Mona Lisa and Venus de Milo and so on. Take a look at that and don't tell me it's not possible. So there are ways of making it happen. There are ways of making it happen, even if you want to keep the comic as it is right now. There are ways, though. There are ways. But, again, if anybody was wondering, and again, the timing is kind of ironic because Fantastic did the video on it. the time is kind of ironic because now we kind of get the answer in this one as to why the comic is so handicapped in a way. Handicapped in a way that its full potential can't be reached. It can't be. Now, I'm sure maybe somebody could talk to those at Sega of Japan and say, look, we get why you're doing this. We see why you're doing this, but understand, things have changed. These people will not pull that same crap that Penders did. They understand that if they write any story in this comic that's not connected, to the games, that they become property of Sega anyway. So there is a way to work around this, and hopefully somebody talks some sense into them and gets something, going in the long run. But like I said, characters that cannot be utilized, they can be utilized, but they got to be utilized in a way that presents them as different, all-new versions of who they are, but we as fans know who they are. It can be done. Like I said, take a look at TMNT if you don't believe me. But yeah, overall, this video is really good. I highly recommend it. I will put it here at the end of my video and everything. Check it out. I might even put the link if you're going to get this on the audio podcast version. I'll put the link in the description there. But guys, check it out. It's really good. Really details the history of why the Archie Sonic comic was looked at in such a controversial, unique kind of way, and what makes it pretty much a prime example of, hey, if you're going to do this, and you might, if you're going to do an adaptation of something like Sonic and given a little free reign, just remember that whatever you create, no matter whether or not you signed something or you didn't, and there's a good chance you may have done that, but you just don't know it, everything is eventually going to belong to the people whose comic you're writing for, because it's based on their character. But anyway, though, guys, it's a good essay. I highly recommend you guys check it out. And let me know what your thoughts were on it. And what are your thoughts on some of the revelations here? Like, basically the fact that the IDW comics are handicapped due to the fact that Sega, Sega of Japan mostly, doesn't want to take any chances in having their comic based on their character go in a direction that, caused the previous one to go down the tubes. Because also apparently that's where the whole conflict, or at least the genesis of the conflicting began, because Sega of Japan wanted it one way, Sega of America is like, no, we needed another way, when it came to Sonic's, introduction. So, that's where the conflict began, and now Sega of Japan basically got, the whole hands on the IDW book, and I do apologize, that's a notification you just heard. But now they got their hands in the IDW book, it's kind of making it a bit of a hindrance. But it looks like that ruling might be frailing a little bit, might be becoming more lenient. That's why you're seeing some references here and there. But hopefully, maybe if that's the case, we'll see the characters show up. But like I said, be done in a way to where we know who they are, but they're not the same as they were in the Archie books or Satya. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Let me know if you've watched that video by Matt. And until then, I will talk to you all later. God bless. Take care. And I am out.